Here at the Brighter Ministry, we want to liberate, encourage, and bless you on your journey. But nothing we share here is meant to be medical advice. Please find the care of your own local healthcare professionals to guide you in your decision making.
Welcome back to the Brighter Podcast. Today is part 1 of my conversation with our one and only Steph from the Brighter Podcast. Steph is going to share her testimony of God bringing her from death to life during her second-born postpartum journey. In this episode, you'll hear Steph explain what happened during this time and the support that she had in order to overcome her lowest point. We hope you enjoy it.
In this world, we face hard things. For some of us, the hardest stuff exists within ourselves, as we or someone we know grapples with mental illness.
We believe there's great hope and power in the gospel of Christ, and that this hope and power can defeat all darkness, even the most eluding and treacherous kinds.
If you've ever wondered where God could be in all of the loneliness, confusion, and difficulty, stick around.
Here, we share practical and spiritual truths from the Bible and our own lives to help you navigate through whatever you may be facing.
We believe that wherever you are in your journey, Jesus can make it brighter.
Hello and welcome back to Brighter Podcast. We are in our second season now. This is episode 3, and today our special guest is Steph, my co-host.
That's right.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Steph's postpartum testimony. It's an incredible story of God's faithfulness, and yeah, so pretty excited for this. And
yeah, me too. Yeah, it's not something I think when we started the podcast, I was like, oh, I have to share this story or really anything personal, because that's not what this has been.
No.
But there's been times, I think, before and after recording episodes with you where different parts would come out of my story and I would just be talking to you about it or other people.
Or even like it might kind of be like, I know in Leonard's episode you briefly touched on something, and it is such an incredible testimony and an area like postpartum where you hear people talking about like postpartum depression, but it's not really talked about. People might say like, oh, I experienced the baby blues, but that is a very real thing. And so we want to bring light to that. And we both personally have, as listeners know, we both have mental illness, and this has inevitably come into our pregnancies. Yeah. Because it is kind of a part of who we are. So
yeah. And for me, it's such a story of just God's pure unmerited favor on my life. Mm-hmm. That when I even look at what we're doing here, I'm like, it's why we're doing what we're doing is because of the story of death to life for me, and for you, and what we want for others to experience in Christ. Yeah.
Okay. So here we go. So Steph, why don't you give us just like a little bit of background? You've already shared with listeners that your diagnosis is bipolar type 2.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. So, and for anyone listening who doesn't know that, or maybe someone's listening who hasn't listened to our other episodes.
True. Yeah.
So I have, not like it's the only label for my life or whatever, but I have been living with diagnosed bipolar 2. And that's meant different things at different times for me. And I've had lots of stretches of stability, and I've had like several very severe episodes as well as other just moderate episodes since I was about, I would say 20.
Okay.
And even before that in my teenagehood struggled. But this particular story kind of evolves around when my daughter was born. So she's my second born.
Right.
Her name is Lucille. And she was born in 2019, the fall of 2019.
So she'll be 2.
She's just about to turn 2.
Yeah, because it's the fall now. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. We're coming right up on her birthday. And yeah, basically what happened is, as a person who has like some exposure to mental illness and you kind of know, okay, you're going into this vulnerable because of all the hormone changes that come with pregnancy and all the things that can happen, the sleep loss that comes with having a new baby and a toddler at the same time,
right,
especially. I think really I just kind of dismissed that because when I had my son 2 years before Lucille, nothing happened. Like,
you were fine, like mental health wise, you were okay.
Completely fine. And I didn't have any episodes. Actually, I did lose sleep, but he was a great sleeper as a newborn.
Right.
So
all things considering,
he still woke up at night to feed him, whatever, but it was very, very easy with him. And so I never had an episode. Like I didn't have anything happen.
During pregnancy and postpartum.
Pretty much. Yeah. It was all very stable. And so when I had my daughter, I went into it, and actually between them, I didn't even really have anything go on. I was stable the whole time. Okay. It was like the longest period of stability in my adult life. Wow. So going into having Lucille,
you were thinking,
I was thinking like,
smooth sailing.
Yeah, we're good. Like I'm not going to have that anymore. Yeah. Cause I don't have that anymore, I guess. Yeah. And when she was born, I had been treated a little bit during pregnancy for some antenatal depression.
Okay. And by treated, what do you mean?
I was seeing a psychiatrist, because I was having a lot of depressive symptoms in my pregnancy with her. And I had some family stuff, some really heavy stuff go on right before I got pregnant with her. And it was kind of all compounding. And in my pregnancy, I was at home like with my son, who was 1.5, and just having a really hard time kind of functioning. And so I was on a really low, the lowest dose you can go of a pregnancy safe antidepressant.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I went into like time to have my daughter, I had been on that for a couple months and was stable. And I was on the lowest dose, and it was kind of all fine and well.
Right.
So, but when I had her, I just stopped taking it.
Right. And that was I'm assuming because like you're busy.
Yep.
You have a toddler, you have a new baby. You're not sleeping a whole lot.
Actually, I wasn't really sleeping at all. So that was part of the other problem. When Lucille was born, she had a lot of like reflux, and she had some other issues, like especially the night and the night after she was born. And I had just given birth and was basically not sleeping. And I've had 2 babies, and I know when people say like, oh, I wasn't sleeping at all. I really wasn't sleeping, like barely at all. And I think for most nights in the first 5 weeks that she was born, I was getting maybe 2 hours, because I would put her down or like work on getting her to sleep, and as soon as I set her down, she would wake up 20 minutes later. That was the longest she could really go. She had a couple random stretches, and those nights I was super thankful for it. I functioned better those days. But really I just was not getting even enough sleep to call it sleep deprivation. It was just like not really sleeping at all almost. Yeah.
And as we all know, I'm assuming, like when you're functioning on little sleep again and again, night after night,
it kind of accumulates.
Gets to you, whether you have a mental illness or not. Yeah. Like your functioning ability just continues to decline. Yeah. So especially when you put in bipolar type 2, not getting sleep is not helping in any way. It's making things way worse.
Exactly. And actually the whole management plan for bipolar for me has always evolved around sleep. So medicating sleeplessness to help alleviate and prevent episodes. Yeah. Because for me, sleeplessness would trigger like an upswing in my mood where I'd kind of start over functioning and have that kind of hypermania. Yeah. It's called hypomania. And then there'd be the drop after a couple days of that.
Is where things can get really dangerous. And as we'll find out is what happened.
Exactly. And I think there's also something special going on hormonally in those first really especially those first 2 weeks, especially the first 5 days and 10 days. But overall, the first 15 days really are huge hormonally.
Well, and yeah, there's even like a few days after your milk comes in.
Yeah,
and
if you're breastfeeding, that affects you.
That is huge. Even if you, again, have no mental illness, that can be
a stumbling block.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like already, mental illness aside, this period of time is like you're up and down. You're so happy you have this baby. You're exhausted. There's people all over the place. Like it's a lot to take in.
It is, yeah. And it's also very blurry of a time.
For sure.
That's just the way
Which is kind of how like an episode
kind of
feels.
Yeah.
Thinking of it.
Yeah, I guess so. So in that time, I think because I had been a little bit in denial that I was vulnerable to an episode, and I had basically just forgotten to be taking this low dose antidepressant, and was not sleeping when my husband went back to work, and I knew I was kind of having a hard time because if I sat still for too long, I would just start crying. And couldn't really stop, and just had this kind of desperate feeling all the time that I was like underwater and I couldn't manage. My son did not have an easy time transitioning with the new baby coming into the family. He had a lot of outbursts. He was very newly 2 years old. And he had a lot of outbursts, a lot of tantrums. I remember sending a text to someone who had also had 2 children and just saying like, when does this get easier? I feel like they're both crying all the time. I can't help my son because I have to help my daughter first. Yeah. And he's just crying all the time and screaming, and I can't help him, and I'm not sleeping, and I'm not even able to do anything. And she just said, like, lower your expectations for yourself. Like, it just sounds like you're trying to do too much. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm trying to do very much at all. I just want to get through the day and help my children cope with their needs. And
where were you at postpartum? Like,
so I was about 3 weeks.
Okay. And Taylor went back to work.
Taylor went back to work after about a week and a half.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was by 5 weeks that I went into crisis. So that time was like a slow escalation of what I was dealing with. And the first little bit, I was like, okay, no, it's just the first wave of baby blues, because there is a difference between baby blues and postpartum depression. First of all, the words, let's explain that. Yeah, well, let's define some terms. So the term postpartum.
Yeah.
Some people say like, oh, I got postpartum.
Right. But
because they're referring to postpartum depression. But
like, technically I am still in postpartum because I had a baby 8 months ago.
Exactly. Postpartum.
It's a period.
Yeah. That is a term to describe the first 12 to 18 months after you give birth to a baby.
Yeah.
Because your body is in a postpartum period. That's just what it's called. And some people believe you never really exit that.
Yeah.
Because it just alters your body and your mind.
Completely. Yeah.
So much. And then postpartum depression refers to the specific set of kind of symptoms that you experience when you're experiencing postpartum depression. And that can occur or start anytime in that first 12 months.
Yeah. And it's a diagnosable thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those ones where you have to check a certain number of boxes kind of thing. Like, everybody has a hard time their first year, their first baby is born, I think. And then there's other ones like postpartum anxiety,
postpartum psychosis.
Yeah, which is what I ended up having.
Yeah.
And then there was another term.
Baby blues.
Oh yeah, so baby blues are it's a shorter lived experience. It goes away. It's usually within the first 2 weeks.
Right.
And it has a lot to do with that hormone drop and that change in, especially if you're you're nursing your baby, and the lactation affects your hormones so much. So that's baby blues.
Yeah. And again, that's much shorter, a lot more manageable. Whereas postpartum depression it needs to be 2 weeks or more. And can accumulate to kind of get worse and worse.
Absolutely. Yeah. So around that time, around the 3-week mark, my husband was back at work. I was really working at just over functioning and doing a lot.
And probably mainly focusing on your children.
Yep. I wasn't doing a whole lot else, like just trying to, get out of the house every once in a while, make sure everybody was fed, all the diapers were dry and clean, and, everybody was, right side up and dressed and clean clothes, including myself. And then I started hitting those waves of denial. So I think the first real, when I had a big crying bout. I couldn't get my daughter to sleep during the day. This is during the daytime. I couldn't get her to sleep. She's very, very upset. And I just kept thinking, no, it's because I'm not getting outside enough. I'm not getting enough fresh air. And I haven't been taking any supplements. And I haven't been doing any exercise. I just feel dumpy because that's what I've been doing. I've just been kind of doing this thing and never stepping outside of that to get fresh air and really wake myself up and, do that better version of my lifestyle.
Right.
So,
and what you were probably used to.
Yeah. And I just felt no, this is not depression. It's just, I'm just not trying hard enough.
And to be fair, sometimes that can be going outside more, paying more attention of your what you're putting into your body. Sometimes those can be okay, I'm feeling better now.
So that's what I did. So I started doing that stuff. Didn't see any change. So then I was it's because I'm not praying enough. And I just had these sort of waves of attacks on myself like that. It's because I'm not doing enough. I'm not trying hard enough. This should be easier, and I'm the one making it hard somehow. Yeah. So by week 5, basically, I texted Taylor. This is the day that everything went really bad. I texted Taylor, and at this point, I was crying almost all the time. Not really coping well through my day. My son was still having a lot of outbursts, and my daughter was still really not sleeping. The only way I could get her to sleep was in my arms while kind of bouncing up and down a little bit.
Which is lovely, but gets very exhausting, especially when you're extremely exhausted.
Yeah, it was a lot. So, and for people listening who are oh, could have just done this and this and she would have slept it. We tried everything. Yeah. I tried 20 different brands of pacifiers. I'm not exaggerating. Whoa. We dropped at least $150 on pacifiers because I was certain that the next one I bought, she would take. This one's
gonna work.
And it was such a contrast to my son, and he slept so well, and he had a pacifier, and he would love to be swaddled, and it was just I don't know she won't do any of the things that I know how to do with a baby. Yeah. So I was 5 weeks postpartum, and I texted Taylor, can you take the rest of the week off? I think it was a Wednesday or a Tuesday. Can you take the rest of the week off? I'm really not doing well.
Did he know at this point?
He kind of knew a little bit, but like I said, I didn't really know.
Right.
Because I was sort of being so hard on myself. I just sort of thought those few moments I had that were really great were just because I had worked harder for those moments, and I just needed to keep working harder, and then it would all come together.
And I don't know about you, but when you're around other people, for me, and I'm in an episode, you can put on a face. You can, for me, I can seem like I'm functioning better, even though inwardly I might feel like I'm falling apart. And if I'm by myself, it's a lot more visible. So perhaps even you weren't you were maybe experiencing all this a lot more when you were alone, just with the kids.
Oh, definitely.
Than when Taylor was around.
Definitely. Anybody's worst and best parenting moments are always when they're unseen.
On their own.
Yeah, unseen. Yeah. So I had texted Taylor, can you take the rest of the week off? And he said, sure. He would talk to his boss. And that was around noon. And I remember because my son, Jonathan, had just gone down for a nap. And I was desperately trying to get Lucille to sleep so that I could have that sort of small window where they're both sleeping and I could get a few things done, prep dinner, kind of, come up for air in a sense. And she wasn't going to sleep and I was just crying and crying. Finally got her to sleep in the carrier and was prepping dinner. And then just during that time when I couldn't get her to sleep, I just felt like I couldn't even see the next time that I would get her to sleep. Like, because it was so much work to get her to sleep at any point. And I was just so tired that imagining another time, one more time even, of trying to get her to sleep was so much on my mind that, like, literally I just imagined the future and all I could see was just like black. Like I just could not see any more steps forward through what I was going through.
Yeah.
And I had been really spiraling in my mind too, of thinking, I had this kind of thought pattern of like, this is so hard. I can't do this anymore. And then building on that, like, this is so hard. I can't put her to sleep again. I can't take another 2-year-old's tantrum.
Right.
I can't make another dinner. I can't, like, I just felt like I can't do this anymore and I can't ask for help. And it was just this sort of I can't narrative that was just coming in waves. And I was feeding it in my mind too, because that's just where I would go. And I know it was conscious, but at most levels it wasn't, because it's just sort of all I was living. It's just all I was feeling too. So by the end of the afternoon, I had gone from like, okay, Taylor's going to take the rest of the week off, to like, I can't live anymore. I can't. In the same day. It was a really fast, like I had already been kind of feeling that, like, and leading up to this day, I would have these sort of like daydreams of getting into a car alone and just driving far, far away and never coming back, because I just wanted to have that peace and just drive away from this situation I was in with these two really, really little ones.
Yeah.
And by the time the end of the afternoon came, I had gone from Taylor's going to be off the rest of the week to let's just put a show on for Jonathan. He can watch his favorite show. I was literally, every time he came near me, I would just hand him like a granola bar.
Right.
And just say, like, keep going, buddy. And like, laugh with him about his show. And he'd just go back and keep snacking and watching his thing. And I was just bouncing with Lucille and researching means, like looking up lethal means on how to end my life.
Wow.
And then I texted Taylor to come home right now. I had this kind of like urgent sense that he needed to come home. And by the time he came home, he needed to physically intervene. And he called an ambulance. My sister-in-law came to watch Jonathan. And the ambulance allowed for Lucille to come with us because she was 5 or 6 weeks old at the time.
Okay.
And she would not take a bottle, of course. She wouldn't take a soother. She wouldn't take a bottle. She wouldn't take anything. So for her to leave me would mean that she's
not fed.
She wouldn't be fed. So she came to the hospital, even though I was, of course, in a terrible state. Taylor was able to just stay with her and me the whole time and help with her. And I would feed her, between seeing the doctor and at Emerge. And thankfully when I was there at Emerge, the psychiatric nurse that came in was really good.
Oh, good.
And I remember that conversation with him. A lot of it is very blurry from that day, but I do remember the conversation I had with him, and he kind of pulled me out of the moment I was in and talked about my whole story and looked at my chart, because he could see I'd been to Emerge before, right? As a person living with bipolar, I'd been suicidal before in recent years, and he could see like the pattern of me getting stable. And he was like, look, you're going to get stable. It's the pattern that I'm seeing here. You will get stable again. You will get better. We just have to treat you, do all the right things, you will get better. Like, can't you see that pattern? And it's not, I couldn't deny it. I literally just said, you're right. But it was a matter of, okay, now I need to want to get better.
Right.
Because now I'm at this super, super low place. It's so much work. You just know that imagining stability and imagining feeling great and functioning and, you know, being your normal self just seems so far away when you're in that state. So I did listen to him, we left with a plan. So they discharged us from Emerge the same night. We were able to go home with a plan to get help and talk to my psychiatrist, and we had a safety plan in place so I wouldn't be left alone with the kids or just on my own. Taylor was off work. Yep. And so we spent the next couple days just trying to talk to my psychiatrist, who just so happened to have gone on vacation.
Of course.
So we ended up back in Emerge just to be able to talk to the same care providers that we had on the first trip, to try and get some care. And we had a different team there that night, and they were not as good. And they gave us a really hard time about having Lucille with me and about just about the situation we were in and whether it was safe or not. And I was still not feeling very well, of course, because nothing had changed really from a couple of days before, except that Taylor was home now. And he was also helping at night now. So, and I should also say, like, in those 5 weeks, I never asked Taylor for help at night.
Okay.
Because he was going to work. I didn't want help at night. I thought, I can do this. I just need to, like I said, I was being hard on myself. I'm just not doing it right.
Yeah, I've done it
before. So it's not Taylor's fault. He needs to sleep. He's going to work. I need to just figure this out and whatever. So I wasn't getting help at night. I wasn't asking. And I know he would have 100% helped. But I never asked. And I think I was telling him that I wasn't sleeping much, but I don't think he really knew until the first night he helped. And then he could see, wow, okay, like Lucille.
You're really not sleeping.
And then now he wasn't sleeping. So about 4 days after I had gone into crisis, Taylor was starting to hit a wall too, because now he's fully in charge of the care for Lucille, Jonathan, and now me. And at that point, because I had really just accepted where I was at and I could really allow myself to feel what was going on, I did start to experience psychosis, because it was almost like I had this sort of letting go. I had been holding on, like, you know, trying, keep it together. And then when I let it all go and became in crisis, I think I just let it go so much mentally too, and just was willing to show Taylor and everyone where I was at, that I did start to experience, like, I'd be sitting on the couch and just basically feel like I was floating away from my body, started losing touch with reality. Taylor was, like I said, in charge of all of our care, and he was starting to have a hard time too, because he was also not getting enough sleep now. So we called his parents the one morning. I think it was like the Sunday after the Tuesday I'd gone to hospital. And we called them and just said, like, no one in this house is doing okay. Can you just come over and help out a little bit? And they called back and they said, we want you to move in with us. And they're like, we will take care of you.
Wow. What a blessing.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. It was a huge thing to take on for them. But I think they saw where Taylor was and where I was, and they knew it was like,
they had to step up.
They had to step in. None of us were doing okay. And so the same day that we had called them, on the Sunday, they came over. Lucille slept in my father-in-law's arms, and we packed our whole house up, basically. Like, everybody's enough clothes and toothbrushes and everything that we needed, all the baby stuff, the burp cloths and the diapers and everything. And we just packed basically a small car full of stuff and went over to their place, and that was that. We were there for the next basically 3 months while I was recovering and Taylor was off work.
Okay, so he stayed off work during that time.
Yep. Yeah, so he got off work, and this was now the beginning of November.
Okay.
No, sorry, the end of November. And so he was off work, and his work was great. They were so supportive.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So he was able to take a mixture of like vacation time and other
like parental leave.
Kind of, yeah. And they were able to just make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So he would help care for me and Lucille. And then my mother-in-law was on like full-time toddler duty with my son because I still was not functioning. And by the time we moved in with them, I didn't know what day it was.
Wow. So you'd really declined.
I had really lost touch with reality. Yeah. To the point where basically I'd feed Lucille and just kind of shuffle around the house. I remember we were at Taylor's parents'. I don't even know when this was. And I remember looking in the mirror for the first time in like weeks.
Yeah.
Because new moms know this. Sometimes you just don't. You don't look up to like fix your hair or whatever because you're just in and out of the bathroom, wash your hands, go, whatever. And I brushed my teeth and my gums all bled. And I realized I don't think I've brushed my teeth in like 4 weeks.
Wow.
I don't think I've looked in the mirror in 4 weeks because I just haven't been functioning. Yeah. So yeah, we stayed with them. I remember every day Taylor would basically orient me. We'd look at a sheet together that had the date on it, what happened the day before, what was going to happen today, kind of what was going on. And, you know, I was having a lot of dream states where I would not know what was going on.
Like you weren't really present?
Yeah, and like there was something, and this is how I know it was psychosis. I was having some delusions about my mom stealing our garbage from our house because we were not at our house. We were at my in-laws.
Yeah.
So she would go over to help. So she would just take care of the house a little bit for us and whatever. And I had this kind of delusion that she was trying to steal our garbage from us. And that she was secretly a cat person, like that, you know, if she unzipped her mask, you'd see this giant cat morphed person. And she would, you know, and it was this conflict between her and Tay. And obviously none of that was true or even related to reality. But I was having dreams and I was mixing up my dreams with
reality.
With reality. And the first time that I realized really that it was as bad as it was, Taylor and I were in the waiting room for an appointment because I was going to a lot of appointments. At this point, I was seeing my therapist, and we had found a psychiatrist who specialized in postnatal and antenatal care for women with bipolar, which is very specific to me. So that was amazing. Yeah, it was truly a blessing. And he was great. So I was seeing my psychiatrist a lot, just doing a lot of appointments, taking my daughter into her baby well checks. And I was still seeing my midwife up until 6 weeks postpartum. So that was right around that time.
Right.
And Taylor and I were in a waiting room, and I looked at a newspaper that was sitting on the coffee table. This is pre-COVID, so there was newspapers out and reading material.
And you could actually go to appointments.
And you could touch them. And I saw that Trudeau's face was on the front, and I didn't read really what it said, but I saw that Trudeau was on the front, and I just looked at Taylor and I was like, oh, I really wonder what's going to happen in the election. Like, is he going to win? Because, you know, blah, blah, blah. And Taylor just looked at me and he said, you know, Steph, you voted in the election.
This has happened.
The election happened weeks ago, and you and I went and voted. And that was completely gone for me. And that's when I started feeling a little bit scared, and I started clinging to Taylor a lot more. He became kind of like the lighthouse in the storm for me, because he could remember everything, and I was having lots of gaps in my memory and stuff like that. So those first few weeks at Matt and Jan's house were just pure blur.
Yeah.
It was a huge blur. Taylor did all of Lucille's naps with her. He figured out this little like method to get this cute little newborn baby to sleep. Finally, he would put her on his shoulder and just kind of bounce up and down and make a shushing sound, and she'd sleep there for like an hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
On his shoulder. so yeah,
him.
Bless him. I have lots of pictures of her on his shoulder during that time. And Matt and Jan were just 100% available. We did so many family meals. I know my sister-in-law was over all the time. My mom was really supportive during that time. My parents from up in North Bay came down to visit even and just see how we're doing and support us as much as they could. And by the week before Christmas, I was doing much better. They had ramped up medication enough that I was getting stable. Every day was a little bit better than the day before. I did have a bit of up and down with the medication and some side effects and nausea and stuff. But then once I settled in and they found one that was breastfeeding safe.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so it was better. And Lucille was starting to sleep a little bit more. So by Christmas time, it was a different situation.
Right. Your stability was getting there.
Yeah. And also, I had such a huge net of support.
Yeah. You were really wrapped around with informal supports, right?
Yeah, really. Like the professional care,
as
well as the family care. People were dropping off meals. You know, our pastor came to like our place and was dropping off meals. And, you know, it was right during that time that we were staying there that we lost our pastor at Open Door, Howard. Yeah. And I remember I wasn't able to go to the funeral because Lucille was sick that day, but I was well enough to go. And that was in January.
Yeah.
So in January, we went home. And at that point, we were doing okay. Thanks for joining us for part 1 of my conversation with Laura, where I got to share my testimony. In the second part of this episode, we are going to be hearing more about kind of my shift in perspective, you know, deciding to have more kids and trusting Christ with a new postpartum experience and a new pregnancy after such a scary experience, and really just the amazing grace and unmerited favor that God has over my life. I hope you'll stay tuned. Definitely check back next week for part 2 to get the rest of my story. Thanks.